Good morning, everybody. I am here today on my own channel today to work on building a new Alexa skill. This serves a couple of purposes for me. The first is there's a lot of things that I do and build and play with when it comes to Alexa, but one of the things that I don't get to do that often is actually start from scratch. There's a lot of things that have changed and grown and been modified since the last time that I really built any serious skill from the beginning. I've been working on existing code bases for a while. And so as I've been spending the last hour or so just trying to get my skill up and running, I've already run into some issues and challenges. So one of my goals this morning is to just get the skill up and running and build some initial intents to think about the way that we're going to build what I'm calling a Star Wars databank. So the goal of this skill, the thing that we're going to try and build this morning, or at least start to build, it's going to take way more than this morning, is to build something that knows about all the things in the Star Wars universe. So this includes characters like Darth Vader and BB-8 and stuff like that, but it also includes planets and vehicles and weapons and creatures and species and all sorts of interesting stuff. So that is the goal of this. I have a lot of the data. I wouldn't say all the data, but I have a lot of data already stored in a data source, so I'll be able to pull on that stuff as I need it, and I think it's structured in a good way. But the thing I really want to do this morning is just get into building a new skill. And so that's what we're going to spend our time doing this morning, at least for the next hour or two. And so I'm just going to get right into it. So I'll flip over to my everything view where you can see my editor here. And the thing that I found already, the thing that I was working through this morning is I don't know if they've made recent changes to the default templates that we use when we build skills or what. So I'm actually going to take a step back. And right now I'm in my Star Wars Databank project. What I'd rather do instead is I'm going to bump out of this into my GitHub folder, and I'm just going to do ask new just to show you what this process is kind of like. So I'm going to bring my terminal up a little higher so you can see everything. And you can see that I have a choice of, here, let me bring the bottom of the editor up a little. There we go. Now we can at least see everything. So I have my choice of Node.js or Python. We can work in either, but I'm much more comfortable in JavaScript, so I'm gonna choose Node. And then we have a bunch of templates we can choose from. And the one that I thought I was going to use was Hello World, but it seems that I'm having some issues even getting that to work this morning. And I'm not sure why. So we're going to just, without making any changes to it, I'm going to choose Hello World again and see if I can at least get it deployed as its default thing. And we'll just call this one Star Wars Test because I can't figure out what I'm doing wrong, but there seems to be a bunch of errors when I try to deploy this. So I'm going to do that. It's going to use that template. It's going to create that thing for me. So let's go look for it. So I have a folder now called Star Wars Test. And if we look inside there, you can see we have our models and all the other stuff. So one of the things that I like to start with is to open the skill.json. And let's just take a look at that because there's a whole bunch of model information and things in there. But at the very bottom of this, if you've ever run into situations where you're like, man, I wish I had named my Lambda differently. This is before I've deployed it or anything like that. I like to have a different name for my Lambdas that I'm actually using. So Star Wars Test. So if I change the name here before I've deployed, this will be the name of my Lambda function, which is kind of nice because then I can give it a unique name that I want. It doesn't have all that other Ask Console stuff in there. So that is where I'm going to start, and I'm going to save that file. And then I'm just going to deploy this as is. I don't want to make any changes, and I just want to see if it works because I made minor changes that shouldn't have made any difference, and I had issues a moment ago. So let me take a look here. I have, I think, everything I need. Yeah. So we're going to do ask deploy. The issues that I was running into was a bunch of new NPM modules that I hadn't seen before and hadn't used. So hopefully this will have different ones, or maybe it'll work this time. I'm not sure. I know they were recently making some changes to our templates, so it's possible that I'm just misunderstanding what's there or whatever. So we've got our skill metadata deployed. That's good. The next steps will be for it to build that skill, which is what it's doing now. It's polling the models. And then the final step after that will be to deploy the Lambda. And it'll deploy the Lambda as the name that we gave it. So we just have to wait for that to happen here. Whew. And because this is the first time, it obviously takes a little bit longer. It's got to push all the data up this time, not just the differences. So we wait for the polling. And again, I haven't made any changes to this code at all, but this should push a new skill up to the dev portal and push some Lambda code out to my AWS account. And that's because I've got all the CLI stuff already set up and rolling. So I really like working in the CLI because this allows me to have everything kind of in one place. Good morning, Matthew D. Groves. Thank you for joining me. I was watching you earlier this week, so thank you for tuning in. I'm glad you're here. I'm waiting for my stuff to be deployed here, and that's totally fine. My Lambda function should go pretty quickly because there's not a lot in there. And as soon as that's done, we'll go give this a run. Okay, so that is all great. There's one thing that I realized I forgot, and so let's take a look really quickly at that. So I need to go into models, and I have one called NUS. So we want to open that one, enus.json. And in here, it's called Hello World. I'm just going to call this Star Wars test also, just so I'm not confusing myself. That way, that's my invocation name, and everything is obvious. I tend, if I forget that stuff, sometimes I will forget to use the right name or whatever, and then I can't figure out why things aren't working. So we'll just do an ask deploy with the, is it model? I don't remember that syntax. Apparently that worked. So the first time that I deployed, I did ask deploy, and that'll deploy everything. But this time I've only made a change to my model, so I don't want to deploy all the Lambda stuff again. So the dash T stands for target. I could have just written dash dash target, and that would have also been the same syntax. I'm just shortening it up a bit. So we'll wait for that to push. It's going to have to validate the status of all the models again. All of that is fine. It's just one of those things you got to do. And we're going to figure out what exactly could be wrong with this template, if in fact anything is wrong. Waiting for the deployment is the best. This is one of those things, though, that you have to deploy. You could get away with doing all of your development, all your coding, all your Lambda Node.js stuff. You could do all that locally. And in fact, in this template, they've included a thing that is a local debugger. It's a script basically that you can use that allows you to set up some things online and allow your endpoint to basically talk directly to your local machine. You can even set breakpoints and stuff like that. I haven't done it before, so as we go through this process, I think that might be one of the things that I try to play with, because being able to set up a breakpoint would be absolutely huge in this entire process of debugging, rather than just reading logs and figuring out what went wrong and constantly deploying code out to the cloud. So we'll see when we get there. Okay, if we're deployed, let's do this. Okay, so we're there. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to jump over to my browser, and we're going to go to the developer portal, and we're going to look at my list of skills, and I need to refresh this because we just added a new one, and it's called Star Wars Test. You can see it's got all the languages already built in. That's part of the template. Get rid of some of these successful build messages, hopefully. And the thing that I really want to do is go to the English US Get rid of these green boxes, goodness. Why won't those go away? Okay. Okay, that's good. So the next thing I want to do is go to test, and I just want to see this skill work. That's the key to all of this, is just making sure that I haven't broken anything. So I'm going to say open Star Wars test.
Welcome. You can say hello or help. Which would you like to try?
All right, so at least the skill is working, and if I say hello,
Hello world.
it will say hello world back to me, but the key to all of this is that it's working. Because there were some dependencies and some things that I was playing with that were very much breaking the skill, and it was a bunch of node modules that I wasn't even familiar with. So I was really having some trouble figuring out what it was doing and why. So this is really good news. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to jump over to my file explorer here. We're going to look at first the Star Wars test, and we're just going to take the Lambda folder. I'm going to copy that into the project that I was working on, which was Star Wars Databank, and I'm going to take this one and I'm going to move it to the trash, which is down here somewhere. And then in my Star Wars Databank, I'm just going to take that exact same code, and we're going to dump it in here. And now we're going to go try that one. Because everything's working, it's fair to assume that this one would work too. So let's see how much I've broken things just by doing that. So I'm coming into Star Wars Databank this time. I'm going to have to redeploy that code, Jeff. You have to push it to the cloud. That's one of the requirements. So we'll do cd Star Wars Databank, cd lambda custom, and then we'll do, oh, that stuff's there, that's fine. So we could do ask deploy. This time we'll just target the lambda. And this should be pretty quick. Deploying a lambda function doesn't require any validation or anything like that, so it should be just a few seconds, hopefully. Although I am pushing up a whole bunch of stuff. There we go. That should have pushed up and overwritten anything that was up there, I hope. So now let's go back to the browser and say test and see what we get. So this one's called Star Wars Databank. So I'm going to say open Star Wars Databank.
Welcome. You can say hello
Awesome.
or help.
Okay,
Which
good.
would you like to try?
So that gets us past my first hurdle, which was I couldn't get a skill to work. But it seems like I had made a bunch of modifications. I was trying to do some homework ahead of time, but we'll do all the homework together, and it will be just fine. So, okay, so that's great. So we're in a working state. Also, another thing to note is that I have a device here in front of me. You guys have probably seen that before. This is my device sitting right here. And we should be able to do the same thing by talking to it. So I should be able to say, Alexa, open Star Wars Databank.
Welcome. You can say hello or help. Which would you like to try?
Hello.
Hello world.
All right. So that's the whole skill. That's what it does right now. And that's exciting and cool and new. So now we need to really think about designing our skill to be able to take advantage of what's going on. So I'm going to come back into my code view here, and we're going to live here most of the time. The important thing to know is that if you tend to live here, tend to live in this design tool, the developer console, when you come to build, I am getting messaged. When you come in here, there is a JSON editor in the developer console. And if we look at this, you can see that this is what my interaction model currently looks like. I have cancel, help, stop. I have a hello world intent, and then I have the navigate home intent. And you can see that those are all modeled out here. So that is my design. And if we go to the tools that I'm using here, you can see that I have the exact same file. Although I have a fallback intent because I'm in the wrong skill maybe. So let's close that just to make sure I'm working on the right one. And And in here you can see that I have all of the exact same code. So when you work in the developer console, you're just using a visual tool to generate this file. What we're going to do is instead just work here directly. And one of the things that I tend to do from time to time is say, oh, I need a new intent. Here, let's do this really quick because I'm not sure. I'm going to just flip to me and see why my machine is freaking out and if it's anything I need to worry about. Cool, okay, it's just Slack being noisy. So I'm going to quit Slack, and I'm going to quit Amazon Chime, which is our internal messaging tool. And I'm going to quit email because email. So let me get rid of those three things, and then we will come back to showing my screen like this. And I'll bring the bottom of my browser up so we can actually see everything. Okay, so in here, these are the intents that I currently have. Now let's think about what it is our users are really going to want to do with this. They might say, one, they're not going to know everything, right? If I guess we should maybe take a step and look at our data. That's a good place to start. And so I have some data that is living in a database on Airtable. And if we look at like my character table, for example, we have in this first column here, which is name, we have a whole bunch of characters. I've really gone heavy on the A's. I've covered off on almost all the A's, I think. And then it gets a little more sparse as you continue down the alphabet. But I have a lot of the major characters included, although there are certainly some that are still missing of major characters. But as I'm going through this, for example, you'll see that Yoda isn't in here yet. Yoda is a minor character in the Star Wars world. And so you can see that I'm going to need to add those things as we go through this. But then I also have some data. So I have a pronunciation column. This is used if the name itself is very difficult to pronounce. So for example, in the Solo movie, there is a character named Kira, but her name is pronounced Q-I-apostrophe-R-A, Kira. But when I need Alexa to pronounce this, I am more than likely going to need a pronunciation guide because she might say Quira or something like that, which is not what I want. And so I'm going to need to tell Alexa, like, hey, when you see that word, pronounce it this way. So if I have a value in this box, I will use that instead of the actual name. I'm also going to need synonyms as I'm building out my slots. I'm going to need the other things that people might say. So as an example, Anakin's mother, Shmi Skywalker, her actual name is Shmi Skywalker Lars. But it's very possible that someone might say, tell me about a Skywalker. And then I can come back and say, oh, here are all the people that match Skywalker. And I do that with my synonyms. So I will need to include those as well. And then I have an image for each character, as well as a voice description, a car description, and a screen description. So the reasons for these is, again, pronunciation. I want Alexa to say things properly, but I don't want to use that exact same text to put it on a screen or on a card because they'll look different. For example, this Kira right here, I will probably change this in her description. So I'll do it right now. I can just say Kira, K-Y-R-A, because no one will ever see these words. These are just what Alexa will say. So it's okay to spell things wrong or phonetically or whatever, because when I display something on a screen, it will look like this one.
I don't know that one.
Okay, you're getting muted. And then the rest of it kind of flows together. I also have some other metadata for every character, and so you can see here for Kira, she is a member of an organization called the Crimson Dawn, which is a criminal syndicate in the Star Wars Solo world, if you haven't seen that movie. She is from the planet of Corellia. That's where we originally meet her in the movie. Her species is human, and she was in the movie Solo. So you can see that some people, like Wedge Antilles, this is Luke's friend, he was in episodes 4, 5, and 6, but also in Star Wars Rebels, which is a TV show that is out. So I'm keeping track of where have all of these folks been. So like this guy, he was in episode 7. So I'll add that in there. But as we go through these things, this is all really useful data because we can pivot on a lot of this information if the more we know about someone. And so having these kind of collections and organizations and affiliations let the user say things like, tell me about a character from the movie Solo. And then we can just come in here and grab one randomly and say, oh, here's Dryden Voss. Let me tell you a little bit more about him or whatever. We can also ask them what their favorite movie is, and then when they start the skill, we could give them some piece of information about something from that movie. Because for appearances, we don't just have characters. We also have all of these other categories. So here's my droid table. Well, let me flip this over. I'm working on doing some data entry as well. I have a droid table that has the same thing. So if we scroll out here to the right, you can see that I have appearances for them. I have creatures. These are things like, the way I think about these are types of things where none of them ever have a name. So a bantha is what the sand people ride. A wampa is the monster that captures Luke at the beginning of Empire. A tauntaun obviously is the thing that Han puts Luke inside of right after he's attacked. But none of these characters ever have a name. They don't have a personality. They don't ever have like a real role. They're just things. And so I had to be really distinct about this because creatures are one thing, but then I also have species. And species are all of the types of characters that there are. So a character has a species, but a creature does not. A creature is just a creature, and it's basically its own species. I don't know that I love this data structure, and I can always change it around, but this is kind of what I've gone with for now, is that there are these species of creatures that exist in the Star Wars world that don't ever have a real name. We also have a whole list of vehicles, so I got to flip all these over to the data. These are all of the vehicles, well, they're not all of them, but this is a starting list of all of the vehicles that you might find in the Star Wars universe. So it's all the different kinds of ships and speeders and stuff like that, but we also have specialized ships like Slave One, which is Boba Fett's ship. We have the Millennium Falcon is in here. We have First Light, which is Dryden Voss's ship from the Solo movie. As we move on, we have weapons. I gotta flip all these over to the data. For weapons, we have all sorts of interesting stuff in here. We have different blaster pistols and rifles and whatever, but we also have like Kylo Ren's lightsaber, a very specific weapon. And so Ahsoka, if you guys know Ahsoka from the Clone Wars, she has some very specific lightsabers as well. And this will continue to grow as we add weapons to this, of course. But the nice thing is that all the data lives here, but there's never a time where I need to go like really make some major modifications to my skill. I hope I can just continue to add data. So technology is another cool thing that I have here. There's not going to be a ton of these, but there are certainly going to be some. And they're things that are just technologies. They're not weaponized things. So like coaxium is an energy source in the Solo movie, but like the moisture evaporators that they use on the Lars farm in Episode 4, where this is what Luke needs to go find some parts for or whatever. He wants C-3PO to be able to speak the language of moisture evaporators. In all of these cases, these are just technologies that we find in the Star Wars universe, but they're not specific weapons or vehicles. They're just technologies. And this will probably be a shorter list, but I think that there are some cool things out there. There's also, I've run into cases where there's just things. And there's a few of these, and these aren't really technologies, but they're things. So this was one that I was adding just to try something. I'm going to delete this. Sabacc is a card game that you see in the movie Solo. Han Solo's dice, you've seen in a bunch of movies, but they're a pair of gold dice that basically hang from his like rearview mirror, even though he doesn't have a rearview mirror. And then the Boonta Eve Classic, if you recall this from Episode 1, this is the race that Anakin Skywalker enters as a potential way to win his freedom. So these are just things that exist, and again, I think there will be many more of those, but they don't really fall into any of the other categories. They're just things or artifacts or stuff like that. We have lots and lots of locations. These are any place that we have found a character existing in some movie or show. And so there's lots of names of planets and cities and buildings, but I'm really trying not to go further than that. So a good example of this is Tatooine is certainly a location. It's a planet. Jabba's palace is on Tatooine, but it's its own location. But then there's like Jabba's throne room, right, where a lot of the action happens at Jabba's palace. But I don't really consider that a location. I don't really want to get deeper than like the name of a building, and I haven't found a need to yet. So that's kind of where we've landed on this. Is we would go as far as to say this person or this thing existed or has been to Jabba's palace, and so there's a long list of these things. But like Bespin is a good example. We have not only Bespin the planet, but we also have Cloud City, which is where Lando exists. And Matt, are you suggesting Lando's cloakroom should be a location? Maybe. I don't know. I'm torn on this sometimes because I don't want to get overly specific. I'm trying not to create situations where there's only like one or two things inside a location. I'd rather there be a larger set of data. But something to consider, and I know that I'm a terrible person for saying that, but I'm thinking about how I can really make this useful. And if the data exists and people can ask for it, I don't want the answers to be disappointing. So we will continue to iterate and work on this, and I'm starting to open this up to people adding data to it. So in those cases, if Matt Groves decides to add Lando's cloakroom, there's not a lot I can do to stop him. So we have a long list of species. If I come in here, these are most of the species of things. You can see that I don't have a lot of descriptions for them yet. I've just gone through and dumped the specific names of those things. And so there's lots and lots of different... I have 2 Mon Calamaris in here. That's no good. What does one of them have data? Yeah. Sometimes I double enter and don't realize it. So we'll delete that record. But as we keep going through this list, you can see there's lots and lots of different kinds of species in the world. There's also lots of organizations. So as we look at this, we have, the Blue Squadron, we have Clone Troopers, we have Crimson Dawn, we have even things like Death Star Gunners. There's a collection of about 5 or 6 people, actual characters in the movies that fit into that category. All sorts of different First Order stuff and Imperial stuff. Inferno Squad is an organization specifically from the game Battlefront 2, which I'm also considering part of this canon, I guess. But we have things like Kanji Club from Episode 7. All of these are organizations, basically, that exist in the Star Wars world, and we assign people to them as we identify it. And then my last data point is droid type. This is kind of like species, but for droids. These are the different kinds of droids that exist in the world. All of this data will continue to grow. I'm not nearly done. But it's kind of interesting to see this stuff coming together. And then finally, my last one is a list of what we consider canon, I guess. And these are all of the things right now. Yeah, we should definitely add some Easter eggs like that, man. I think that'd be cool. I didn't make a deal with Kanji Club. Well, why don't you ask Kanji Club? I think that's great. So this is the list of things that I consider canon for this skill, I guess. And I think this is generally the list of things that are considered canon. But I'm trying not to venture out too much beyond this. I know there's tons and tons of books and a really extended Star Wars universe that can get really big and really complicated fast. So I'm trying to stick to just the things that have been on screens. So that's movies and television shows and video games. But I could certainly be convinced to add more things if it makes sense. Okay, so that's all of our data. So the natural inclination of a developer when they're building something cool, the holiday special is not canon. Stop it. The interesting thing that most developers try to do is they say, okay, I need an intent for each one of these data types. And we probably do, but I don't think those are the interesting ones. I think it's the composition of these things that becomes really interesting. So let's start with building some slots, because I think this is going to be one of the trickier things. For those of you who have followed me in building my trivia game, I had the luxury of knowing more or less what you were going to say. I could ask you a trivia question, and then I could actually populate my slot at runtime with the data that was the right answer for the question. And so I could know pretty readily whether or not you got it right, because you would either match my slot value, the one that I had inserted, or you would not match it, and if you didn't match it, then I knew you got it wrong. That's kind of the logic that the trivia game works for. The problem with this skill, the problem with doing a database like this, is that we don't have that luxury. I don't know what you're going to say. I can't predict it, and I can't force you down some kind of telephone tree where I say, okay, do you want a character, a droid, a vehicle, a weapon, or a technology? And then you tell me one of those, and then I slowly but surely narrow it down. You're going to say, tell me about Dryden Voss, or you're going to tell me about Lando Calrissian, or whatever it is. And I need to be ready for all of those all the time. So we will build some intents this morning to catch those specific kinds of things. And if we can get to a point where we have built those intents and I can respond back to you and say, hey, you asked me about a person, or hey, you asked me about a weapon, I think that will be good. And these are the core definitional, I don't know if that's a word, these are the core definitions of all of the things. So if as an example, if we go back to my character data, in this case, let's use Count Dooku. He's this line right here, so I'll highlight the line. If you were to say, tell me about Count Dooku, I would say the voice description. Count Dooku is a menacing whatever. I might even start by spattering in some of these things. He was affiliated with the Sith. He lives on Sereno. He was in episodes 2 and 3 and the Clone Wars. Those are all the kinds of things that I can kind of spatter together in a response. But these are just core definitions, right? I'm really just composing the data that I find in this row, and I'm reading it back to you. I think what's more interesting, and I'm not sure how I do some of this stuff yet, would be things like, who is Luke Skywalker's father? I don't have that data. I don't even have a way to come up with that data. I personally know the answer, but I don't know that there's an easy way for me to identify without building an entire other relationships table that identifies who's with who and who's married and who's had kids and whatever. And that, I think that would get pretty complicated pretty fast. So I think, at least initially, we should go two directions. There should be a, give me a random thing, and it doesn't matter how they say it, but they might say, tell me about somebody that was on the Death Star. Okay, cool. And then we go randomly grab somebody that meets one of those conditions, or tell me about someone that's a Sith. Those are things that are pretty easy to do too, because we have all of this metadata. We might also say, give me something from Rogue One, right? And then we could randomly decide whether we're going to give them a technology or a vehicle or a droid or whatever from that specific movie. That's a little bit more development to understand, one, which table we're going to grab, and then finding data in that table. But I think, at least initially, all I want to do is build a simple skill that allows people to ask for a specific thing, it's a good initial go, but I don't think it's the core way that most people are going to use the skill. At least I don't think it is. But I think it's one of those, it's like table stakes. Like, you have to do this thing too, because they may want to come back later and know about Droopy McCool or Dryden Voss or whoever. Okay, so I've spent enough time talking about my data and what's going on there. So the next thing that I want to do is start building some of these intents. So what I like to do is use the developer portal to build the first one, because I never remember the syntax exactly, and it's easier to use the design tool to just build the first one. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to add a new intent, and we'll call this the character intent. And in my character intent, I'm going to need a bunch of sample utterances about what they might say. Now, we can always add to this later, but I'm going to say, tell me about Han Solo. Give me information about Droopy McCool. Who is Count Dooku? What else can I use here? Who is, tell me about, give me information. What about just the name? I could just say, like, Luke Skywalker. Okay, so those are all examples of sample utterances. I will add more later, but this is a good starting set. And the thing that I really want to do is give it a slot. So I need to create a new slot that we're going to call character. And I didn't really want a second one. And I need to choose a slot type. I don't have that yet. So I'm going to create a slot type that is character. Create a custom slot type. And in here I will I'll fill this in later because I can do a bulk edit, or I can just upload a file like this. We'll have to generate that and whatever, but we'll get there because I have a ton of characters. So I have a slot type, and I have my utterances here. I need to tell it that it's a character slot type. But if I come back to my character intent, you can see now I have a slot called character that is of slot type character, all really clean and obvious. And then in here, instead of this, what I'm going to do is take my slot name, and I'm going to replace the names that I typed in there with my slot name, because I don't actually want a single utterance for each name. I want to be able to have the user say whatever they want. And so by doing this, I now have a template for how people will speak to my skill, where they might just say Luke Skywalker, or they might say Darth Vader, or they might say whatever, or they might say, tell me about this thing, this guy, this character, whatever. Now what's interesting about this is we are going to use almost an identical template for every one of those data types. But the slots themselves will have enough gravity to pull the user to the appropriate intent so that when they say something, it goes to the right place. So I have my basic character intent. We're going to go back to my JSON editor, and you can now see that I have, well, maybe I have to save it. Thought I would just have it there. Missing type. Oh, I don't have any slot type values yet. So we'll come in and add a couple of those. So we'll do Luke Skywalker, like a type, and we'll do Darth Vader, just so we have a couple in there. And I'll save that. And now I should be able to come down here to my JSON editor and see the changes that I've made. And so you can see here that I have a character intent. I have a slot called character, a type called character, and then some samples that are those sample utterances that I defined. And then I also have this slot type down here, which includes those values. So I'm going to take that down to here. Yep, I'm going to copy that, and we're going to go back to my code. Actually, you know what? I can make this even easier because this is my first change. I'm just going to take all of it, and we'll come back here and replace all of it. And so now we have all of that stuff, my character intent, sitting right here. So the thing that I would like to do is just give this a quick test. So I'm going to deploy my model, which again is the one that takes a little bit. And this will be the most painful part of our process as we go, is that every time we want to add values to our slot, every time we want to add new characters to the system, or whatever it might be, we have to go through this process that takes a minute or 90 seconds. It's not the end of the world, but it is one of those things that you kind of have to wait for. And the reason we wait is because what Alexa is doing behind the scenes is building an entire model that represents all of our data, all of the ways that a user might speak, and building out its machine learning engine for that specific purpose. So it's deployed my model. It still needs to validate it, so that'll take just another minute. And once that's done, then we should be able to test this by opening the skill. And actually opening the skill won't work because we have it saying hello or whatever, and I haven't written any code to actually accommodate that. I'm getting a little ahead of myself, but I think that's okay. I have my launch request that's going to say, you can say hello or hello world, but what we don't have is something to catch the individual character intent that we just built. So right here, I'm going to say character intent handler, and we're going to build that. And then up here, where I have my hello world intent handler, I'm going to just copy this. We're going to delete a lot of this stuff eventually, but for now it's okay. And instead of the hello world intent handler, I'm going to say this is the character intent handler. Now, the way this works is I know that it's going to be an intent request, and we called it the character intent. So that's all perfect. And then here, the speak output, this is the thing that I will say back to the user. I'm going to say, you asked me for a character. So I'm not going to do more than that, but I will turn the reprompt on. And we'll just change that to be the same thing. Speak output. I am going to change all these variable names and everything because I hate a lot of this, but I think it's good for now. Okay, so what we should expect to have happen now is once I deploy this Lambda code, we should be able to open the skill. It'll say something. It'll say whatever my welcome message is here. We have this all externalized. I'll fix that too. It says welcome. You can say hello or help. What would you like to try? And then I'm going to say Darth Vader. And the response should be, oh, you asked me about a character, which is the thing that I have written here. So let's give that a roll. I think that our code is all in a good state. I didn't have any typos or anything. So let me go ahead and deploy our Lambda, which I have right there. And we will wait a few seconds for that to happen while it's zipping up my files and shipping them up to AWS for me. And we're done. That's an amazingly fast process. And now let's just try it with our voice. Let's just test on the device. We'll jump over here. Alexa, open Star Wars Databank.
Welcome. You can say hello or help. Which would you like to try?
Darth Vader.
You asked me for a character.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, so we've got Alexa quit. So that has gotten us to a place. Alexa quit.
Hello world.
Alexa quit.
I can do that on or Prime Video.
Ooh, sometimes
Which would you like?
Stop. Okay. So we've gotten to the point now where we've built a very simple intent with a very simple slot and a couple of basic sample utterances. We'll want to expand this. And it's easier to expand this once you have some users, once you talk to people and do some beta testing and things like that. Because it's easy to draw a blank on like what are all the ways someone might ask about an individual character. But this is a good start. So the next thing that we want to do is we want to use the same process, but now we want to do it for droids or whatever our next data point was, which I think was droids. Yeah, so droid is the next one. So what I'm going to do is take everything that we have here, like so, and this time I'm going to call it droid intent. And I'm going to have a new slot called droid and a new slot type called droid. And in here, I'm just going to take this and I'll also add another one because I don't think you would say this for a person, but you might say what is R2D2 or whatever. So let's do that. And then the other thing that I need, and I'm going to tighten this up a little bit just so it's easier to manage. Is that the way I want to do this? Probably is. It's just to clean this. Like they do a lot of formatting for you. And normally if I'm trying to make this as readable as possible, I might do that. But what I'm trying to do right now is make it as concise as possible. So we're going to do like that instead. In fact, I'll just take this one. We'll call this one Luke Skywalker. Just so we have those values in there. Okay, so I have my type, which is character. And I'm going to take this, and I'm going to create a new one. This one will be droid. This one will be R2D2. Now this gets a little more complicated because the pronunciation on these is weirder. C3P. Okay, so what we need for this is synonyms, and again, for lack of memorizing syntax, well, the easier way to do this is to come into my character slot that I created earlier, and I will just create a synonym call that is Vader. And I'll come look at my JSON editor to see what it did there. That's always easier for me. So I can see that it added this comma and then the synonyms. So we're just going to do that. And then over here, I will do that for all of them. Let me make sure I got that right. Where does the comma go? Value. So it's all part of the name node. Value, comma, synonyms. All right. So I have value, and then right here I would have synonyms. We're gonna tighten all this up. So that it looks like that. And then I'll do this for all of them, just so that I have synonyms in there, because I may not need them. Like I'll take Luke's out for right now. Just leave it empty. But at least by having that node in there, then it's very easy to add synonyms later if I need them. So this one, we'll do things like R2 or R2D2. Oh, forgot some quotes. And what I'm trying to do is catch those phonetic soundings. This is another one where 3PO is a way that people might talk about that. Or C3PO. Yeah, so I think we're good. I don't think we have any issues or errors. Oh, yeah, we do. Comma. Okay, so I have character and droid. So that's good. I need to come over here and create another handler. I don't know that this is how I'll live. Like, well, we may refactor some of this, but for now, I'm just going to build one for each. Droid intent handler. Down here, we have our droid intent. Droid. So what we're doing is checking to make sure that we're in the right place. So droid intent. You asked me for a droid. Again, I'm not actually getting the name or digging into it at all. And then the thing down here at the bottom that we need to do is add the droid intent handler to our manifest here. Droid intent handler. Okay, so I have made changes to my model by adding a new slot and a new intent. I've made changes to my lambda, so that means I can just do a straight up ask deploy and push everything out to one place. Let's see, I'm curious. We've got 3 people tuning in, which is, it's not a huge number, but it's a number. But I've only have Matt Groves talking, and I love talking to Matt. But it'd be nice if a few other lurkers out there would chime in. I'd love to know if you have any questions or thoughts on what's happening here, or if you have experience with this stuff. If you would go a different direction, I'd love to hear your perspectives on this stuff. So please join me, chime in, talk about it. The best way to do all of this stuff is to learn and share and grow. And that's why I like doing this stuff on stream, is because I have a way that I do things, but it doesn't mean it's right. It just means that it works for what I'm trying to do. But people might have encountered things that work better for them. Looks like everything is good, so let's try that again. Alexa, open Star Wars Databank.
Welcome. You can say hello or help. Which would you like to try?
R2D2.
You asked me for a droid.
Nice. C3PO.
You asked me for a droid.
Luke Skywalker.
You asked me for a character.
Haha. Darth Vader.
You asked me for a character.
Lando Calrissian.
Hello, world.
Okay, so I don't know if you guys saw what happened there, but I asked for a character that I had not included in my slots at all, and because I have other intents, it thought that I was trying to do one of those other intents instead. So one of the first things that I want to do next is get rid of those other intents, because I don't need them. So I have this hello world intent. I'm going to go ahead and just get rid of it like so. We will eventually get to a place where it will be able to infer, oh, you're saying Lando Calrissian. You're still asking me about a character or a person or something. So I've gotten rid of that intent. In the code, I can get rid of the hello world intent handler because we won't be using that, and that was up at the very top. So here, so this one is going to go away. I love deleting code. And then we have our character intent handler and droid intent handler, so that's good. I'm interested to see what will happen with Lando this time. I have one other intent that comes as part of the default template, which is the intent reflector handler. This will hit if I talk to an intent that I don't have code for. So if I've built an intent in my model, but I have not yet actually implemented it over here on this side, this is the one that will catch it, because it basically catches any intent request that I haven't already caught. So I think, I hate this formatting. This is all that default code stuff. And I'm going to get rid of a lot of this stuff, I think, eventually. But it's fine for now. I think the fallback intent handler is also something I don't need or want. So let's see if we can find that code. Yeah. This guy, I don't think I'm going to be using the fallback intent. I have other mechanisms for that. So that all looks good. So let's do another full ask deploy where we push our model out. And we're getting rid of that hello world intent that was there by default. And we've gotten rid of the code that runs it. So all that stuff will be gone. And then I'm going to slowly start chopping other things out, because there's a lot of stuff baked into this hello world sample that is a great bit of code to have for samples, but it is not necessarily a great thing to have for the way that I want to approach some of these problems. So we will have to figure out how to get rid of some of these things. For example, they have this fantastic file, I-18 Next, which is internationalization, and they have a file called language strings. And if I look at the language strings, you can see that we have, there's 7 strings there, and as you go through this, they have a translation for every single language. Well, there's no way that I'm building this skill for every single language. As much as I would like to, that's just not going to be possible. And so as we go through this, anywhere that I see the language string stuff, I'm going to rip that out because I don't need it. And that might actually be how I broke the thing earlier, is by getting rid of that language strings stuff. So we will see as we get through this. But we are updated. So I want to try Lando Calrissian again just to see what happens. Alexa, open Star Wars Databank. Maybe. Alexa, open Star Wars Databank.
Welcome. You can say hello or help. Which would you like to try?
Lando Calrissian.
You asked me for a droid.
Interesting. So it thinks it's a droid. Well, we don't have a lot of data. Alexa, quit.
You asked me for a droid.
Quit. I don't have enough data to really give it a chance to know what the difference is. And it'll be interesting to see as this grows if we end up with a lot of overlap. I'm hoping that we don't. I'm hoping that we'll end up in a situation where Alexa will be able to infer the difference between a droid and something else.
I don't know that.
I know. All right, so we have droids and we have we have characters. Do I want to just make the rest of them so that the model is kind of structured? That's probably the right thing to do, is just to jam through. One of the things that we're also going to have to spend some time on is thinking about how we best want to get this data out of this table. All I really need is the name column and the synonyms column that kind of maps out to when we look at our model. these values here, the value and the synonyms. But I need this JSON to be created, and I really don't want to do it by hand. So what would be the best way to do that? I could probably do this in like something like Excel. I think. But I'm not sure that's work I want to do on camera. That's kind of boring, chunky work. I'd rather focus on building out my model and intents and code and stuff like that. Maybe what we should do is I'll spend a little bit more time. I'm going to grab my chair. I've been standing this entire time, so I'm going to sit a little lower than I have been, but having a chair to sit here is good. Okay, so I think one of the things that I want to do is get rid of... Oh, I didn't want to do that. I want to get rid of all of the extra stuff that's baked in here and put a few of the things in that I do really like. So, for example, I'm going to get rid of all these T messages. So any place I see .t is something I'm going to want to get rid of. So I'll say welcome, just for now. I have a clever thing that Alexa's going to do, but we'll focus on that later. So let me see if I can find any place I have .t, like so. There's 4 of them. So I'll say, right now I'm just going to say, you said help. Just so that I can keep track of what the user said and make sure that I'm parroting that back. This will just say goodbye. And then what else we got? Where's another one? .t. No, we're going to take all of this. We're just going to, instead of all of the reflector message stuff, we're just going to say whatever intent name is. We'll say you hit the intent name. All right. And then there's one more. Error message. Error. And I prefer this to be error.stack. These are all just these little things that I do that make my life easier. I don't know that they're better for everyone, but they simplify a lot of the things that I'm trying to accomplish when I'm building a skill. Another thing that I'm going to do is down here we have this request interceptor, localization request interceptor. What is this? This is the thing that does all the T conversion. So let's get rid of that. I don't want it. And we're going to get rid of this for right now. It's going to come back in a moment, but let's just do that. And I'm only changing the lambda, so we'll do this one. And let's see if we can get this to a place where it still works, because I just ripped a bunch of code out, and it's very easy to break things if you haven't tested it. So let's see. Alexa, open Star Wars Databank.
Welcome.
Han Solo.
You asked me for a droid.
Quit. Okay, so that worked. That's the good news. So now we need to come back and do a few of the things that I really like. So I have a file that does this for me. If I go, see if I can find it. This one. This is my trivia game where I've built a lot of the things that I really like, and a couple of them are this stuff. I will need all 3 of these lines, and I'll explain what I'm doing here. So I have a request interceptor and a response interceptor, and these are functions that I can designate that happen before anything in my skill happens and right after I send the response back to Alexa. And so what these allow me to do, and I'll show you with the functions that I'm going to grab here, which are my response log and my request log. This is about to get a lot simpler, but I'll come in here and add these. So they're both going to end up looking like that. So I'll just take this. All of this can go away. And what I'm doing is I have request log. This is where the handler input.request envelope, this is all the data that comes into my skill from Alexa. This is where this lands. And so before anything happens in my whole skill, I write that thing down. And I say, this is the request envelope. This is the thing that we're going to be working with. And then in my logs, that'll be the first line. And then I can follow everything that happens after that. And the last thing that will happen will be the response builder. So I'll be able to see, here's the data that came in, and here's what I sent out, if I can get my hand on camera. And then everything that happens in between are log statements that happen during that individual session. So that is what request log and response log are for, and that's what the response and request interceptors are for. With API client, this is what allows me to basically make external API calls. And so I'm going to also lose this custom user agent because I just don't, this is something from the hello world, so I'm hoping I can just get rid of that. And that's the only change I'm going to make for right now. And we're going to push the Lambda one more time and just give it a bump just to make sure that, again, I didn't specifically break anything. Because I find that if I make large numbers of changes, then I end up not having a lot of luck tracking down why did I make that change or where did it come from. Alexa, open Star Wars Databank.
Welcome.
Luke Skywalker.
You asked me for a character.
Quit. Okay, that's good. So we're making progress here. I think I can get rid of this language strings now. It's not even being used according to the editor. So I can get rid of I18 next and language strings, which, again, if you're building a skill for multiple languages, very, very valuable. But I'm going to end up taking all of my language strings, and we're going to end up having them live over here as well. So in fact, I'll build that now. I have all of these individual tables. This is from when I was originally building this, but now everything lives inside this data table. And I'm going to have another one that is start from scratch. We're going to call it speech. We'll mark it as red also, and we'll give it a circle like the other one. And that's good. So in my speech table, my speech database, I guess is the right way to call it, I will have things like welcome. And I'll have another one called goodbye. Create empty table. Goodbye. And these will be the messages that I use to respond to a user. So I can say, welcome to the skill, here's what you can do. And then I'll have another one that is all the goodbyes. And so if I come to my trivia game, I have created these already in a way that I like, with a structure and an amount of data that makes sense. So if I come into welcome, you can see that I have a few pieces of data here. I have an is disabled. This is something that I do quite often for most of my speech data, because if I want to take something out of circulation, all I have to do is check a box. And so we are going to take this structure. Is that what we're going to do? Yeah. We're going to take this structure like so, and we're going to copy it, I think. Thought maybe I would do that. Let's try that again. Highlight everything, Command C, and I'm going to come back to where I was in Star Wars, and for my welcome table, I'm going to delete these columns, because I don't need them. I can't get rid of the first column, but that's okay. And then here, I'm just going to paste. And so you can see that now I have all the columns that I need. I've already pulled the data over, which is super awesome. And one of the things that I want to do is change this to be record ID, like so. And what we're going to do is they have a bunch of very cool things in here, like formulas, where I can say, actually give me the record ID of this column, of this row. And so by doing that, these are the actual generated record IDs. So if I try to add a new row, I will instantly have a new unique identifier for that row, which is pretty super cool. So I don't have to generate these or worry about them at all, but I do have a unique identifier for each row. I have my is disabled, which is still a checkbox, which is great. And then I have locale. This is something that I don't have in here yet. And so I'm going to create a locale table. And we'll go back to, let me just open up another Airtable, because we're going to be jumping back and forth a little bit here. But in my trivia game, I have down here at the very end things like locale, and I have language and I have country, and this kind of composes all those things together. So I will take this one first. This is country. We've added a few since this, so that's good as well. So we'll come over to speech here, and we will create a new one called country. And we'll get rid of these other columns. And then here I will drop the list. And I will add Brazil. And I think it's PT-BR. I think that's what it is for the locale. We also need a language table, which is language, like that. And we'll come over here and we'll go into the language one, and we'll take these two columns, get rid of these, so I can add Portuguese here, Portuguese. Right, and we'll figure all that out in a second. So I want to make sure that I have this right. So this is locale, but this links to objects in the locale table, which is great. But this is just a string. Country is just a string, again linking to locale. And then locale here, this is where we piece them all together. So the last piece that I need then is locale, which we'll get rid of these. And we will talk about locale, and we'll take all of these columns. I don't care about the other ones. We'll take these three, and we will jump in here and paste. And we end up with something like that. And it thinks they're all strings right now, but what's cool about this is that now I can, for language, I can customize my field type, and I can say, I actually want to link to another record in the language table. And I do not want to link to multiple records, but that I don't actually think that works in their process. And then for this one, I'm going to link to another record. I'm going to link to country, like so. And so now I can get rid of these columns. I guess I didn't really need these columns. We'll rename this to locale. And this will have a locale too also. Delete that. Okay, so now in my locale table, I should be able to do like Portuguese, Brazil, and I say that the language is Portuguese, and the country is Brazil. And now I have a new one. So in here, if I look at my country table, you can see that PT-BR shows up here now. And for language, I can see that PT-BR shows up for here. So I've joined these together. I have a nice relationship between all of these fields. And then in my welcome table, I can change this to say, no, I want it to be instead linked to another record, and I want it to be choosing locale. I can choose multiple records for these because I may want to have them across all the different English languages or something like that. And then goodbye would be the same way. And I haven't created this one yet. But it's not super important yet. I just wanted to give you a quick view of what the table looks like. But we'll rename this to record ID just so I don't forget. And we'll set the formula up for it so that it equals record ID. Great. Okay, and then we'll worry about adding some goodbye and welcomes. All that stuff is further down the road. We haven't even connected to a database yet. So, okay, so we have our speech data, or at least the place that the speech data is going to live. We have all of the regular data for our skill, which is all of our characters and things like that. And so the way that this is ultimately going to work is we're going to come in, the user's going to say something like Luke Skywalker, and instead of saying you asked me for a character, what I'm going to do is use the data that they've given me, the words that they spoke. I'm going to match that against the list of values that I have in my slot, and then I'm going to take the slot values and I'm going to reach out to my database and try and grab the appropriate record out of the appropriate table. And bring that data back, and then respond to the user and be able to say, oh, Luke Skywalker is this person, or whatever. So, should we... I feel like it would be more interesting to do just the character one than it would be to build out all of them and just have them kind of say things like, you asked me for a character. Yeah, I think that's probably the right thing to do. So, I don't need IAT next anymore. I'm trying to figure out, when I did this earlier today, because I was trying to make sure that I knew exactly what was going on and that I wasn't breaking anything, I ripped a bunch of stuff out of this skill, and then it just all stopped working. And I couldn't figure out what I had broken. So I still feel good about where we're at in my package. I'm going to add a couple of things. So one of the things that we'll need is Airtable. In fact, I'll do it the other way. Let's do it like so, and then we'll just do npm install Airtable. But actually I wanted to do that with a save modifier. I don't know why I didn't do that. Let's try that again. npm install Airtable. Okay, so you can see I've added Airtable here. I'm going to do that for a couple more. npm install dashbot. And that should add dashbot to my dependencies, ideally. And I'll explain what these things do as well once we're all done here. Dashbot has been added, and then npm install https, and this is the package manager or package that I use for talking out to the internet. So those are all updated. I'm gonna do ask deploy. Well, let's not do it that way. Let's just that one. Because again, we're not making any changes to our model. This is all Lambda-based stuff. And I'm going to hope that I didn't break anything. I don't think that I did. I think that, all I've done at this point is add some packages, so we should be okay. But we'll take a look here. Come on, Lambda. I know I added a bunch of new files, so it's going to take a little longer than it normally does. Okay, Alexa, open Star Wars Databank.
Welcome.
Luke Skywalker.
You asked me for a character.
Quit. Okay, so that's good. So we have, there's one more thing I want to rip out of this file, at least for now, which is references to these three, because I will need them. And that allows me to talk to HTTPS. This allows me to talk to Airtable and Dashbot. And I guess I lied. There's one more thing. I have a function that I use all the time to make my HTTPS calls, which is right here. This is a pretty standard and straightforward HTTPS function. But we'll chop that out and put it down here at the bottom. It's just one of those. It's one of those utilities that you just include every time. I should probably create an external file version of it, so it would be much easier for me to include from time to time. But that is my Airtable key. I have this stuff all stored in my Lambda already, So it's kind of nice that that works, but every time that I come in here, it'll write out the URL that I'm trying to hit. So if I have any issues or whatever, it'll work. And then I have to specify the table data. I will let it know if I'm trying to get speech, but generally I'm going to be talking to the data table, so that's my default value. And all of the rest of this should be pretty straightforward. It just goes out and uses async. It goes out and chunks the data. Once it's gotten all of the data, then it responds, and if there's any errors, of course, it writes those. So there's nothing terribly complicated or interesting about it, but those are this is a function that I use quite often for all of my Alexa stuff. Okay, so we're in a good place. One of the things that we could try to do now is to at least respond back to the user with the character that they asked us about. I think that might be a good, interesting next step. So in my character intent handler, one of the first things that I'm going to want to do is get the slot and entity resolution values for the user's request. So this will, I don't know how long this will take us, maybe 20 minutes. But this is going to be the first thing that we do. And I'm going to build a function for this because we're going to use it over and over and over and over. So I would start here and then we'll kind of refactor it out as we go. I don't like to get too aggressive in what I build initially, but this is one of those things where I need to be able to validate what the user said and how they said it. So I'm going to come back in here to my CloudWatch and we'll look at our most recent log, and you can see that I have request envelope and request builder. So I'm going to come down to the last one, which is here, and we should be able to see what I asked for, which was Luke Skywalker. Okay, so I'm going to make this a little bit bigger, but this page does not scale very well for sharing. So maybe I can scroll it, maybe I can't. No, I cannot even scroll it. All right. So what I can see here is that I have a value called Luke Skywalker, but then as I dip down here, I have these things called resolutions. And in my resolutions, I can say, oh my gosh, that was actually one of our slot values. They matched one of those. This gives me an infinitely larger amount of confidence that they have said something that I'm expecting. And so I need to retrieve both of these values, but I need to do it in a way that's safe, because if I say something like Skywalker is probably not enough to trigger its confidence, and so none of this whole resolutions node would even exist. So I can't just write code that points to a specific location because it's not always there. And in the same token, it's possible that they might say, tell me about, and never indicate an actual character. And if they don't indicate a character, then this value wouldn't be here. So there's a lot of weirdness to how people speak sometimes. They get interrupted or whatever, and we don't want the skill to just blow up because they didn't say things appropriately. The whole point of building things for voice is to allow users to say what they want, when they want to, and respond in an appropriate way. Okay, so I need to do request.intent.slots.character.value. So for now, I'm just going to write that. So we'll do var spoken words are handler input.request envelope. That's this is the part you just have to know. And then we do, if we go back to the rest of it, we have, well, I don't want the launch request. Let's go to the next one. We're going to do request.intent.slots.character.name. Request intent slots character name. Okay, so here I'm going to do request.intent.slots.character.name. Is that right? No, I don't want name, I want value. Make sure I got that right. Dot value. All right, so that gets me the value that the user spoke. And for right now, because I'm just testing and I'm just starting to work through this, that is technically enough, because I know it's going to be there the way that I'm going to test it. Um, their name is, and then I will just dump this in, spoken words. Okay, so now I will be able to respond to you, at least for, did I not do that right? Spoken words was better. So now I have the ability to say, oh, you asked me about this person. But only if they actually hit the character intent handler. You'll remember when I was doing Lando Calrissian, with Lando we were hitting the droid intent because it doesn't know where Lando should go. It doesn't know what Lando is. But this should be enough to at least get the skill to respond to me. So let's just give that a roll. Again, we're going to have to break this out more because a lot of those values may not exist depending on how the user responds, and we want to make sure that we are being safe about that and only requesting data that actually exists. So I'm pushing my Lambda back out again. It would have helped if I saved it, so we'll have to do this one more time. But once this is done, which should only take another moment, we will deploy it one more time. And in this case, now that my code is saved, we should be able to test. We added all those new NPM packages, and it takes a little longer now to deploy because it's got to zip those up and send them every single time. It sends it all as one big deployment package, which is good and bad. All right, so we will wait for it to hit this time, and then we'll give it a quick test. I'll just say Luke Skywalker just to see what happens. It should parrot that back to me, and then we'll go about building this in a safer way. And we'll build it a function that we can use across all the different slots, all the different data types. Okay. Alexa, open Star Wars Databank.
There was a problem with the requested skills response.
Boom, I blow something up. All right, that is the funnest time you can have is, hey, I broke something. So let's see what I broke. Oh my gosh, this is the error from before, but I don't know what I did. Oh my gosh. What did we just do? So I'm going to save this. Copy it, and then we're just going to Z our way back through this. What did I get rid of? That's fine, I don't really need that to do. I added this HTTP get function. Okay, we'll get rid of it. It's gone. Can't be those, can it? Let's just save it here and see. I fought with that thing for almost an hour this morning, and I couldn't figure out what that error was. And whatever I have removed has officially broken it again. We'll figure it out. Debugging is a good practice. It's a good thing to do regularly because it lets me understand what other people might run into. Alexa, open Star Wars Databank.
Welcome.
Luke Skywalker.
You asked me for a character.
Okay, what if I take this like that?
You asked me for a droid.
Quit. I guess we'll hold off on adding Airtable and HTTPS and all that stuff. I thought we had tested it and it worked, but we'll leave that stuff off for now. Maybe it's my HTTPS function, although I don't think that I had brought that over the first time I did this. I don't know. I don't know why that's happening. So we'll go step by step.
As soon as this lamp is good, we should be able to at least pair it back to me, and then I'll worry about bringing those other elements in. Okay, Alexa, open Star Wars Databank.
Welcome.
Luke Skywalker.
You asked me for a character. Their name is Luke Skywalker.
Quit. Okay, so we're in a good place. We've gotten now to a point where we can pair it back to the thing. Now I want to figure out what's blowing everything up. So I'm gonna come in here. Remember we took these couple of pieces. I'll start with HTTPS. I guess we'll do these one at a time. I'm gonna add this and the function, because I can't imagine the function's the issue, but it does call some stuff, so maybe. So we'll just take like this. I mean, it could be that I'm stepping on some kind of reserved word, or I don't know. I don't know what the issue with this one is, so we'll just drop it right here. So we've added HTTPS, which that function uses, right somewhere. Yeah, this right here. So if I go to the top, I should see it being used, and I do. And again, it might just be a naming thing, which is fine. I can change names, but yeah, I'm really perplexed by why that would break. This is something that I feel like I have done dozens of times before. Alexa, open Star Wars Databank.
Welcome.
Luke Skywalker.
You asked me for a character. Their name is Luke Skywalker.
Quit. Okay, that's great. Let's take Airtable. This is the npm package that will let me talk directly to Airtable. I don't always use it. I actually don't love their SDK, but there are times where it's useful. I use it a lot for the create and update methods, but I don't tend to use it for the read updates, for the read stuff. I tend to make just raw HTTPS calls to their API to get the raw JSON back that I want. But maybe I should get better at that. So I can't imagine requiring this would be an issue. I'm not even using it, but we will try. So we'll deploy that one more time, and then we'll try it one more after that, and then we can get back to writing our function that we were doing. Very annoying. And I don't think it would be Dashbot either. Especially if I'm not even using it yet. So Airtable's obvious, right? That's where my data lives. Dashbot is maybe something you haven't heard of, but it's a third-party analytics tool. You just basically wrap all your commands in, and then it gets all sorts of rich data about your skill and usage and all sorts of cool stuff. Alexa, open Star Wars Databank.
Welcome.
Luke Skywalker.
You asked me for a character. Their name is Luke Skywalker.
Quit. Okay, so my last thought on this is that because I am speaking directly to a API key, maybe that's it. Let me make sure that I'm actually, if I look at my skill JSON, my function is called Star Wars Databank. Let's go to this and just make sure that we're talking about the same thing and there aren't like somehow two of them, or this was updated less than a minute ago. And I'm going to go to camera just for a moment so you don't look at some API keys, and they are there. My API keys are there for both Airtable and Dashbot. Right. I wish I knew what I was doing wrong here. So the last thing that I've done here is I've added this. Again, not using it, and we'll deploy again. This will get us more or less back to where we were when I was getting that error. So I feel like it's got to be this Dashbot thing, but who knows? If it's not this, I'm very perplexed. But that's development, right? Sometimes things work, sometimes they don't, and sometimes you just don't know why. Until you sleep on it and yell at it and have 4 people look at it, and then you're like, oh, there's a semicolon or something dumb. Okay, let's try this again. Alexa, open Star Wars Databank.
There was a problem with the requested skills response.
Okay, so Dashbot is the issue. So let's get rid of that for now. I don't know why it's an issue. It certainly seems like I use that everywhere. Let's see if I can go. I'm going to do this just to make sure API keys aren't on the screen, and they would have been. Okay, how does that compare to what I have? And how does that compare to, did I name the key wrong? Is it like, certainly looks like Dashbot key to me. Sorry to keep you in the dark here. I just don't want to. I don't want to put my API keys on the screen if I can avoid it. All right, so that's. Certainly all looks right. And I call it Alexa because that's what they tell me to do. Yeah, I'm not sure. Okay, well, I guess we'll just leave Dashbot off for now, which is annoying, but that's fine. So I've commented this line out. We'll save that. We'll deploy it one more time. And now we're at least at a place where I know why it's broken. I mean, I don't know, but it gives me an opportunity to play with it later. And I basically just don't have any analytics until, well, I mean, I have the built-in base Alexa analytics, but I really like the way Dashbot does things. So I will have to figure out what's going wrong.
Have to is usually defined as,
Alexa,
with B, ma.
quit.
Have to is usually defined
Alexa,
as.
Stop. Okay, muted. Okay, so let's go try it this way. Since she seems to want to talk so much, we can go to the testing tool here. All of our deployment stuff should still be here, so I should be able to say open Star Wars Databank.
Welcome.
And then I can say Darth Vader, just something else.
You asked me for a character. Their name is Darth Vader.
Awesome. Okay, and so down here at the very bottom of this panel, we can see that this is the value that we just said back to the user, and this is the slot value that we matched. So that's all awesome. So now it's just a matter of grabbing this value also, because what if I were to say Darth?
You asked me for a character. Their name is Darth.
You can see that that still matches. So I could say, you said Darth, I matched Darth Vader, because this is the matching thing. And so what's cool about this is that they can say Darth or Vader or even like the Dark Lord or something like that if I have synonyms for it. And I can go back and say, oh, you asked me about Darth Vader. Here's some stuff, right? So let's go back to our code and we will grab that other value as well. So I have spoken words, but I'm also going to want one that is like resolved words. And this one's going to be even longer. Handler input dot request envelope dot request dot intent dot slots. So we get to slots and we go to character and we go to resolutions. And then after resolutions, it's resolutions per authority, but that's an array. And then values is an array. So let's do those. Resolutions per authority 0 dot values 0. And then over here we want, obviously we want the first one, which is value, and then we want dot value dot name. Okay, so we'll do dot value dot name. Semicolon. Okay, so that is my resolved words, and you asked me for a character, and I can say you said spoken words. Their name is resolved words. I like to be proper about my sentences, so I have spacing and punctuation and all that. You asked me for a character. You said Darth. Their name is Darth Vader. That's the response that I should get. So once I verify that those two functions work properly, I'm going to build a function where I pass in the slot name, because everything else will be the same. And then I can just call that function every time and say, get me the resolved words or get me the spoken words, which is pretty awesome because we will use that a billion times throughout this development process. And to have those kinds of helper functions are going to be incredibly helpful. I'll turn this back on. Alexa, open Star Wars Databank.
Welcome.
Luke Skywalker.
You asked me for a character. You said Luke Skywalker. Their name is Luke Skywalker.
Darth.
You asked me for a character. You said Darth. Their name is Darth Vader.
Vader.
You asked me for a character. You said Vader. Their name is Darth Vader.
3PO.
You asked me for a droid.
Quit. Okay, so we can see that our function's working as expected, but there is the possibility, of course, that those values may not exist, especially if they say the name of someone that we don't currently have in our slot. So this is where we need to break this stuff out. So I'm going to take these two, and we're going to create two separate functions for them. But for now, how would we want to call this? So we would say var, I probably have var spoken words still, equals get spoken words. And in here, I would pass in handler input because I would want to be able to pass that whole thing so it can find it. Excuse me. And then the name of the slot that I'm currently working with, which is character. I don't think I'll need more than that. And then I will need another one, which is var resolved words equals get resolved words. Same thing, handler input character. Now I could go another way, which is to like create a custom object that returns all this stuff to me. but I find that there's a lot of times where I just want one or the other, or I just need a simple response. And building custom objects, at least for something like this, just seems like a bit of overkill. So I'm just going to have them operate independently, and then down here at the bottom we'll build some helper functions. So we'll do it above HTTP. Get spoken words. And we have handler input, and we have slot. And this is going to be that stuff. We'll put them in the right functions in a second. And then this one's going to be function get resolved words handler input dot slot dot slot. Okay, and this one goes down here. So the thing that I have to do, and for those of you that are watching, I would love your feedback on how you would do this, is I need to check basically at every level to make sure that it actually exists. And so the way that I have tended to do this in the past is I just have an if statement, and I will say if handler input dot request envelope and then I will say and handler input dot request envelope dot request. And so you can see I just keep moving down this chain. What this allows me to do is if at any point any of this is missing, it will return a value that indicates that this is not working, instead of just throwing an error, which is what would have happened up at the top. So I have all of this, and then we're going to do the same thing again, because this one's actually going to be slot like that, so we can refer to it that way. And then from here I will just take this, and then the next thing is value. So if all of that returns true, which would be great, get out of the way, then I want to take this value that's here, and I want to return the whole thing. Else return okay, so that means, hey, look, if I found this thing, great, I'll return you the value. If I don't, I return you an undefined value, which is what I will test against in my if statement up there. And then we need to do the same thing with the second one. So a lot of this is very similar. I'm going to take this whole piece. Nope, that's not what I wanted to do. Too many keystrokes. We'll just take the whole thing. So with this one, I'm going to take handler input. We're going to slots character resolutions. So this needs to be resolutions. Well, no, actually, this needs to be resolutions. And then we need to take that. We're going to keep going a little bit further. So with this one, then we have resolutions per authority, with the 0 array indicator, and then the next one will be values. So let me take this, like so, and then we'll take that, and then we'll do dot value, we'll take that, and then the last one is dot name. Okay, so if all of that is true, then we want to take this value that we had here, chop that out, we don't need any of this stuff, and then we just return that value. So get resolved words and get spoken words are two functions that I should have had just laying around because I use them quite often, but I thought I'd build them from scratch just so you understand how they work. And so I have get spoken words and get resolved words. So I have changed this code enough. Let's give it another run and see what happens. And we have about 15 minutes left. You may even be noticing that I have a clock ticking behind me. I got the Echo wall clock. I thought that would be a nice addition to the stream. And I basically just set a timer when right before I started this, so that the timer's running the whole time that we're on clock. So you may have noticed it's counting down. If you haven't, you can rewind and you'll notice that the little blue lights have been slowly reducing as we've been going through this. But we are now almost deployed, and as soon as we're deployed, we'll give this another run and see what we've got. Alexa, open Star Wars Databank.
Welcome.
Luke.
You asked me for a droid.
Skywalker.
You asked me for a character. You said Luke Skywalker. Their name is Luke Skywalker.
Quit. Okay, so something went wrong there, and we're going to go see what it was. So we're going to go into our logs, and we'll come back here and see what I want. I don't know what I just missed there. So this one should be it. It really thinks it heard me say Luke Skywalker, huh? What did it think it heard the first time? It heard me say look. Also very interesting. And so you can see I had no matches down here. So we would have had an error had that been the case. Okay, so this is just a synonyms problem, which is fine. So I'm going to open it one more time, and I'll use Vader because that seemed to work pretty well. Alexa, open Star Wars Databank.
Welcome.
Vader.
You asked me for a character. You said Vader. Their name is Darth Vader.
Cool. Quit. So that is
You asked me for a droid.
quit. These are not the droids you're looking for. Thank you, .commie. It's nice to have a little humor in here. I know Matt was participating early, but I think I made him mad with Lando's cloakroom. So thank you for chiming in and paying a little attention. Any questions on anything I'm doing? This is pretty straightforward, I think, at this point. But if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them with the little bit of time I have left. I think at this point, I'm feeling pretty good about this stuff. The next thing that I would do would be to call out to Airtable and get the data that I actually want. I guess we could try that. So I'm going to come in here just to see my syntax for that. I usually have like get specific let's see what I'm doing there, and then we'll kind of take it one step at a time. So the thing that I really need to do next, and this is going to need to be asynchronous, is that I'm going to create a new function. And what's another nice thing about the consistency that I have here when we look at my data is that for my character table, I have pronunciations, synonyms, image, voice, card, and screen descriptions, affiliation, on and on. So I'm going to get the entire record back. But because if you look at every one of these tables, they really have all the same column names, this will make it very easy for me to be able to say, just go get data. I'll tell you what table to get it from, but when it comes back, I can just say, give me the pronunciation, give me the this, give me the that, because it won't matter what table I'm working with. Okay, so I'm going to say get specific item. I don't know if I can actually pull this off, but we'll try. So this is not something I need. We don't actually know what I'm going to pass in here yet. Get specific item. We're going to call this item, I guess. And then get specific item, I need to tell it what table at a minimum to look for. So that's going to be character. And then I also need to pass in the resolved words, assuming there are resolved words. So this is again where we start to get a little conditional. So if resolved words, this allows me to just do things like this, doesn't equal undefined. Then we will have our item, but now I need to define the item up here. Okay, so now I have item. I have a function called getSpecificItem. I have a character, and I have the resolved words that I want to send in, assuming those exist. If they don't exist, the variable still exists, so I should be able to pass that, and it'll just be undefined. But I won't ever get here because I'm checking right here. Okay, so that's good. Now we need to create getSpecificItem. So we'll come down here where my other helper functions were. And we'll just do it right above this. I may be a little ambitious in doing this. I should probably just scale it back to character and have different ones, but I think it's going to be okay because I'm just going to bring this back as a JSON object. And then depending on which function I'm in, I can talk to the specific properties. So if I go to my getSpecificQuestion function, let's see what I do here. I pass in my Airtable and a bunch of criteria. So I'm just going to take all of this, and we'll talk through what these 4 lines do. So this is my response. This is the thing that I'm going to get back from Airtable itself. And so the first thing I'm passing in is my base data. I'm filtering by a formula. I want to make sure that it's not disabled, but I haven't really. I probably should do that. It's a good responsible move with my data. So for each of these tables, I'm going to add a new column that is disabled. And in here, it will just be a checkbox. Save. So this is one of those things that you don't really give a lot of thought to when you're building this stuff, but man, does it make your life easier later when you're really trying to get through this. So I'm not going to do all of them. I'll do character and droid for now, but I will have to come back and add this column to all of them eventually. Insert left. Is disabled. It's just a checkbox, and again, nothing is checked right now, but if I do find that there's an issue or an error or something, I can at least turn that item off for a little while until I can fix it or whatever. It's an easy way to just shut some of my data down. So this will rear its head as an ugly error later if I don't go back and do all of them, so that's fine. So filter by formula. Is disabled is false. I don't know its record ID. And we are talking about this question. This is actually going to be, what did I call those? I have a function that has the first and then resolve words. So we'll call this table. So we have table resolved words. And so out here, this will be table. I'm telling you what table I want to go to. I need to look something up by something other than its record ID. So this is going to be name. that's what I called my field here is name. So I'm matching on these. These have to be unique. It's enforced by the database. So and those should be unique, which is good. So name equals, and I need to encode it, and this will be resolved words. And then this other piece, which was find locale. I am not doing locale stuff. Where I would have done that with the trivia game, I'm not doing that here. So I'm going to lose the find locale. We'll save that. I don't need to get a random item. I just need to get... This needs to be response.record 0. And then this needs to be question. We'll call this item. This needs to be item. This needs to be item. And we're going to return item. So already I should have the ability to call out to Airtable, get my specific item. Let's come up here and take a look at what we're doing here. So then I can say well, I'll see the write out here in my console log for my specific item, so we'll just look for that. And we'll either get an error or this will work, and if it works, then I can go look at the console log and see what happens. So let's push this through, and maybe that'll be where we stop for today. And then I'll commit this out to GitHub and let people take a look at it if they want to. Come on, Lambda. Let's do this. We have a minute 17. Alexa, open Star Wars Databank.
Welcome.
Vader.
Error.
Quit. Okay. What is our error? So I somehow put in shoot, I just did it. All right. Well, we're going to have to go back and take a look at our function. Oh, I see. This isn't specified. Alexa, stop.
Your streaming timer is done.
I haven't defined this. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I have to create a couple more environment variables for my Lambda function. And that's pretty easy to do here. I just need to dive in. So we're in data now. Take that, put it here. And then I have one more. So what I'm doing right now is I'm creating environment variables to point specifically to my data sources that I have, so that I don't need to write them over and over and over. I can store them in one place and use them over and over and over, which makes a lot of that stuff much easier. So grab that, put that in my Lambda, save. Okay, And then I don't even need to redeploy because I just changed the environment variable. So let's try that one more time. Alexa, open Star Wars Databank.
Welcome.
Vader.
You asked me for a character. You said Vader. Their name is Darth Vader.
Quit. So I'm going to leave this on camera just for a second because API keys are being written to my logs. I'm trying not to show those too much because people are not nice sometimes. Okay, let's go to logs. Let's go to Star Wars Databank is around here somewhere. Okay, that's awesome. All right, so I'll bring it back on camera so you can see it. So this is in my log, and you can see that I wrote out my specific item, and it's pulled the name Darth Vader, and it has all of this data. This is all directly from my database. So you can see that I have an image, and it actually breaks it down. So I have a small, large, and full-sized thumbnail of the image that's in there. I also have my voice card and screen descriptions. So this is the actual description that I could read to the user. And then I have IDs for affiliation and for location and stuff like that. And there's ways that I can tweak this so that instead of seeing these names, I can actually get the raw names themselves. So I will have to play with my data on that. And then I also have the synonyms that I have in my table. So I said Vader. It was able to figure out what the resolution value was from my synonyms. And then it was able to call out to my database and retrieve the record that I needed. And now I can use this data to respond to my user. So we will work on that next time because I'm out of time today. Desperately need to grab some lunch. So hopefully you learned a little bit today. We will continue working on this and bringing data out of the database and into our slots to make that more rich and robust. But I will be back on Monday to do some more of this. So I hope you enjoyed it. I'd love to have more conversations. So as you're sitting and watching, if you want to talk, happy to explain, happy to answer questions or just go off on tangents about Lando's Cloakroom or whatever it might be. So thank you guys all for joining. I'm looking forward to doing this again on Monday. See you then.